Welcome to a special episode of Gangland Scotland Exposed. We're in the southern Spanish city of Fuengirola, where almost exactly 1 year ago to the day this was the place of a brutal double murder that sent shockwaves through Scotland's underworld and beyond. It was on May 31st, 2025 when a lone gunman shot dead two men with intimate ties to one of the most notorious criminal networks to emerge from Scotland this century. Eddie Lyons Jr and Ross Monaghan, high-ranking members of the Lyons gang, were gunned down in cold blood in front of holidaymakers who had just finished watching the Champions League final in what was known at the time as Monaghan's Bar. The killings grabbed headlines across the globe and triggered a huge police investigation to identify and track the hitman responsible. What made the shootings all the more spine-chilling was the fact that it came just months after an explosion of violence erupted on the streets of Scotland's two biggest cities. A gang war sparked by revenge over a drug deal gone wrong. The wave of violence raged for more than a year, with dozens of arrests at home and abroad, including some of the most powerful players in a story of bloodshed, dirty money and drug dealing networks with ties to the most powerful cartels on the planet. So now we've returned to the epicentre of the sun-kissed place where the Lyons mob called home before their empire imploded, amid a storm of police probes, drug seizures and murder. Eddie Lyons Jr and Ross Monaghan were well known in Scottish criminal circles and to Scots crime fighters for years before they met their end on May the 31st, 2025. Their deaths played out in such a public and brazen way, it brought the duo's infamy to the attention of people way beyond the shores of Scotland. The Costa del Sol is of course often referred to as the Costa del Crime, given its long-standing history as a bolt hole or gathering place for organised crime gangs from around the globe. But those with an intimate knowledge of the criminal landscape in this beautiful part of Spain say the murders of the two Scots hoods was way out of the norm.
Well, I remember finding out about it before just as actually I was about to go to bed, and it was late at night, working on it that night, getting very little sleep because I knew it was going to be a busy day the following morning, and I'm waking up early to continue working on it, making police calls, etc., etc. Yet there have been shootings on this coast. It's not a common occurrence, but it's not that rare either, unfortunately. But this was different in that it happened in such a packed area, right next to the beach. At the end of the Champions League final, there were families enjoying, a nighttime stroll. People obviously having a beer on the terrace of the pub where it happened after the football finished, and very nearby, people finishing up their dinners on tables at beach bars who when this started unfolding, were forced to run for cover, fearing for their lives, obviously. I mean, there was horror. People were going about their daily lives and they just weren't expecting something like this to happen. There were some demonstrations afterwards, led by or involving, I think, one of the political parties who wanted the government to get a grip on the mafias that have, behind these sort of incidents. I mean, they would have been known obviously by a large number of Scottish expats living here, but no, they wouldn't have been names known to the Spanish at all. No.
It was no surprise that the brutal killings shot to the top of the Spanish news agenda, and images of the moment a gunman burst into the bar before shooting the Scots duo dead were broadcast on national TV. Inevitably, it also hit the front pages of the press back home and once again turned the spotlight on a decades-long feud between two of Scotland's most notorious crime families, the Lyons and the Daniels. Scots cops insisted at the time of the slayings in Spain they were not linked to the ongoing turf war raging in Edinburgh and Glasgow, in contrast to Spanish investigators who insisted the shooter was a member of the Daniel crew. Weeks later, Michael Riley from Liverpool was arrested on suspicion of murder and extradited back to Spain, where he remains awaiting trial. But a year on from the public and political outcry about foreign gangs that came in the wake of the killings, it seems all has gone quiet.
In the Costa del Sol, shootings are not that uncommon, especially organised crime shootings. But this is something different, of a whole different level, because when you get these shootings, they're not often British mafia or Irish. It's normally, it could be any kind of nationality, but this was rare because it was so public. It was on our doorstep, and it was relating to exactly the kind of crime that we specialize in and we cover. So that was on a Sunday, and we got to work pretty quickly. And the initial kind of response was quite open. People were kind of excited by this in a weird way. It was something unusual. It was so off the charts. What happened? There's not a broad daylight execution, but out in the open public execution with like a very well trained hitman who had everything planned out, disappeared, and the police never found him. It was like something straight from a movie. So so we were speaking to people, talking to our contacts, working them, and in the early days, the response was good. People were talking to us, and then suddenly we found, I don't know, 3 or 4 days later, that everyone just shut up shop and stopped talking, stopped replying to text messages, or stopped answering the phone, or gave us very terse responses. And it's one of those things where you never really will know what happened if people just thought to themselves, maybe I should keep my mouth shut, or if it was intimated to them that it would be in their interest to keep their mouth shut.
So we've come down to the town hall in Fuengirola today to see if we could speak to someone about the crimes a year ago, and if they would be willing to speak to us about the impact that it's had on the community, if any. So we've gone inside and tried to speak to someone from the Vox party, who at the time of the murders were quite outspoken about concerns they had about the number of foreign criminals in the area. But a year on from that now, the shutters have come down, and I think that there are reasons for that. Obviously there's an ongoing criminal investigation following the arrest of Michael Riley, and then there are the wider issues around the investigation into the Lyons gang's activities in Spain in general. So there's more anxiety around speaking about it, maybe a desire not to interfere, not to be seen to interfere with any legal processes. So whereas before there was something of an outcry, now we've been told that no one in the party is willing to speak to us. It certainly hasn't been quiet on the crime fighting front, and it was later to emerge that the Lyons crew were at the centre of an international probe that predated the murders of Lyons and Monaghan. Stunning details about Operation Armorum first emerged on March 28 this year, when Eddie's brother Steven Lyons, the leader of the infamous crew, was arrested in Bali, Indonesia. He was paraded in front of the world's media in an orange jumpsuit amid a wave of arrests in Scotland and Spain, as law enforcement in both countries joined forces to dismantle a mob accused of running a multi-million-pound criminal empire. Lyons had made his home in southern Spain many years ago, following a path well trodden by villains from around the globe, including the Irish Kinahan cartel.
Well, the Costa crime tag comes from, historically, from a time when there was no extradition treaty between Spain and Britain, and UK criminals took advantage of that to come down here and live their lives in the sun. But obviously, in more recent years, it's become home to a lot of, multiple foreign mafias.
We know that a man called Michael Riley was arrested and extradited from the UK in connection with the murders. I understand that you've got some new information about his status. What can you tell us about that?
Well, he's been transferred from his old prison near Malaga, where he's been held since his extradition from the UK, barring a short time when he was in prison in Madrid. He's now been transferred to a prison right up in the northwest of Spain in an area called Galicia. It's about as far, this new prison is about as far as you can get in mainland Spain from the old prison near Malaga that he was in. And I would imagine that that's the indication I'm getting, is that it's linked to the fact that Steven Lyons, who was recently arrested or held on an international arrest warrant in Amsterdam, is going to be extradited here to Spain. And given that most of the people who were arrested in connection with that investigation in Spain were held in Malaga, it's likely that he's going to end up in the prison that Riley was in.
It's definitely kind of a seminal moment, because things, in terms of, things are never quiet in the Costa in terms of crime, but in terms of UK crime and Irish crime, it had been very quiet since the Kinahans left 10 years ago. And so it came out of the blue a little bit. Like the lions weren't really on our radar at all until this happened. And I think a lot of people were shocked to realize how deeply embedded it was into the area, the organized crime. And maybe things chilled out a bit, but of course we had last month, I think maybe 6 weeks ago, a huge police operation against the Lyons organization. So Steven Lyons, the chief, he was arrested and he's now been extradited to Spain. He's arrested in Bali, extradited to Spain. A lot of the head honchos and the capos of this group, they all fell. And there was many arrests in the Costa del Sol, in the Cala Honda, Micas de Cala de Micas area. And again, I think that kind of surprised a few people because things had chilled out and quietened down quite a lot. And suddenly there was these arrests. And once again, people, like ordinary people, were reminded that, God, these guys are here among us. And you don't always know until these arrests take place.
We decided to take a closer look at some of the locations that were raided when Spain's National Guard carried out a coordinated operation on homes and businesses linked to the Lyons network, including a property tucked away in the coastal town of Caya de Mijas. So we're now in a town which is just a few miles down the road from Fuengirola, and we're outside, we're beside this map here which shows an overview of the area. And incredibly, one of the homes that was raided as part of the Spanish police raid on the Lyons gang network is actually featured on this map. If you look here, you're just walking along this seafront here. It's an absolutely stunning area, by the way. There's all sorts of beautiful bars and restaurants, and there's people really enjoying this beautiful weather, which is in the middle of a heat wave, a record-breaking heat wave. But on the map, you can see the swimming pools dotted all along here. It's golden sand, it's an absolute paradise. But amazingly, if we just go down here to this spot, we can actually see the house that was raided as part of Operation Armorum, which resulted in numerous arrests of people associated with the Lyons gang. So we're actually going to take a closer look. So we're just coming along here to the home where Spanish police raided the property as part of Operation Armorum. The van that's just came out there is right next door to the home that we're passing now. It's just on our right hand side. And you can actually see that the door is open. It's unclear if anyone's actually living there. At the time of the raids, astonishing images were shared by the authorities in Spain showing aerial footage of the property as armed cops pounced under cover of darkness. A number of arrests were made, with most of those swept up having since been granted bail. But as we discovered, the area appears to have returned to normal since the coordinated sting that saw Lyons arrested. So we're literally just at the spot of one of the properties that was raided as part of Operation Armorum. Again, it's a really lovely area, quite salubrious, beautiful white painted homes everywhere. There's a dual carriageway which you can hear in the background, traffic flowing, beautiful warm day, and there's not a hint of anything sinister here. And just as an example, we have a summer fashion show which is coming up ironically on the 31st of May, which marks the anniversary of the murders. But again, this just shows you that life has returned to normal here, and that really holiday makers are just carrying on as normal, and there's the shadow of what happened here and the wider context of what happened a few miles down the road in Fuengirola seems to have been almost forgotten. But clearly we still have these court cases coming down the line. We still don't know for certain the fate of Steven Lyons, who remains, as we speak, in a prison in Amsterdam awaiting extradition to Spain, which we expect to happen in the coming weeks. But what of the lasting impact on nearby Fuengirola? Monaghan's bar has been renamed the Irish Rover and looks like any one of the seemingly countless welcoming bars along the strip. But we discovered a more sinister connection close by. Just a short walk away from the pub where the pair met their end is one of the other properties targeted by cops in the Lyons sting. On the face of it, it looks like a humble home in a dreamy holiday hotspot. But cops later revealed it hoarded a dark and menacing secret. We're now in a little residential area in Fuengirola, which is only about 10-15 minutes walk away from Monaghan's bar, where Eddie Lyons Jr. and Ross Monaghan were shot on the May 31st last year. The reason we're here is because there's a property just to my right that was raided as part of the ongoing investigation into the Lyons gang by Spanish police. And if you look around here, you can see this is the one of the rooms that was raided, and inside that property the police explained that they found what was described as torture pictures of gratuitous images of people who have been seriously injured. It's not been made clear, and indeed I think investigators aren't entirely sure the source of these pictures, and whether the people who had them in their possession were responsible for the violence that had been inflicted on the individuals in the images. It's part of the overall ongoing investigation. But the thought of those images and the horror of those images is in stark contrast to this absolutely beautiful park of Fuengirola. These beautiful white homes everywhere. There's not a hint of violence or anything sinister or menacing, and yet behind those doors, some of the most menacing images you could possibly imagine were found as part of the investigation, and obviously we wait to find out more about that in due course. We made a short time-lapse video to show how close the home where the torture images were found is to the murder site. Clearly, whoever was using the home had easy access to and from the bar that was also raided as part of Operation Armorum. The property itself is like thousands of other homes dotted throughout the residential areas all over the southern coast. It pales in comparison to the incredible mansions and wealth that's on display across the region, especially in nearby Marbella, where millionaires and even billionaires live a life of luxury. So we've just come down the coast from Marbella to Puerto Banús, which is one of the most spectacular scenes you're likely to see in this region. The wealth around this area is astonishing, and it's exemplified by this yacht behind me, which is owned by the Saudi royal family. It's called the Lady Haya, and it's often located in this port. But it gives you a glimpse into the wealth that attracts people from all around the world to this region, and that obviously includes people who are involved in serious and organised crime. Not only is this the gateway to Africa and the South American countries that are the cocaine producing countries of the world, but also it's a place where millionaires flourish and display their wealth in all sorts of ways, including with the most huge and enormous spectacular yachts and hotel blocks and apartment blocks for miles and miles around.
Costa del Sol is a criminal's paradise. It's a playground for them. And I mean, it's one of those strange things. The Spanish people, like I think who live there, like the native people, they kind of can't really believe it. But at the same time, they're accustomed to it because it's been going on for years. And it's one of those things that stretches all the way into politics. A lot of the local politicians have been connected to this stuff at one time or another. Every mayor of Marbella has been to jail or gets charged with corruption. So it's something that the tentacles extend very deep. And there's always a backlash when these things happen, but nothing ever changes as far as I can see, and nothing's likely to change in the future. From what I understand, it's not the logistical center of crime. It's basically chosen by the high-level operators in various different cartels and mafia groups, more as like a place to have their board meetings. You know, it's a place where they all can hang out together. Because a lot of these groups, they don't fight each other so much as they compete, and they work together and they pool the resources. So Marbella isn't a place where you'll see drugs being trafficked. I mean, it does happen as well, but its primary purpose is that you can get the leaders of Italian mafia, Albanian mafia, South American cartels, French, British, Irish, any kind of nationality. Swedish is another one. They can all meet in one place, have a cocktail together, discuss business. That's mainly the role that Marbella plays in the whole criminal ecosphere.
We know of strong connections now between the Lyons gang and the Kinahans, and one of the people who seems to be central to that is a guy called Johnny Morrissey. What can you tell us about Johnny Morrissey? And it's just worth noting, I suppose, that we're at a beautiful seaside beach location here, and Johnny Morrissey's mansion is just a few minutes up the road. But what can you tell us about Johnny Morrissey and his current status?
Well, Johnny Morrissey, as you say, does, he's got a house nearby. He was arrested a while back now, and he spent some time on remand in prison. He's on bail. He hasn't been formally indicted. There's no formal accusation in place, and the investigation into him and his wife and a third person who was arrested alongside him is ongoing. And I understand proving to be fairly complicated because it involves a number of jurisdictions, and it involves allegations like money laundering, which is when you've got alleged international money laundering, it's not an easy crime to pursue. We've got no date for trial, as I say, so it could be a while yet before we learn whether, as expected, he's indicted and then is put on trial. Mm-hmm.